Hey everyone, how you doing? It's Clara. So I'm back with another one of my science chats, and in this series, I talk to people working in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics about their work and about things that are going on and about equality and diversity as well. And today is a bit different. Today's a bit special. So the Royal Society of Chemistry, they're releasing a toolkit. Probably the same day this goes live, actually. And this toolkit is for working with LGBTI plus people in STEM. So it can be used for educators, it can be used in academia, it can be used in, for teachers, it can be used in industry as well. There's guides on allies, there's guides on all sorts of different stuff. It's a really there's lots of stuff in the toolkit, and I think it's really nicely put together. So this comes in response to a survey that was done by the Royal Society of Chemistry, the Royal Astronomical Society, and the Institute of Physics, which was looking in the climate for LGBTI plus scientists in physical sciences, and I'll put a link to that report below. But basically, it said there's a lot more to be done, and so one of the recommendations is that we create a toolkit. And by we, I mean they. So yeah, the idea was that we produced a toolkit, and what's fantastic is that it's less than a year. It's just over a year since the report was released, and the Royal Society of Chemistry have followed through and released this toolkit. And like I said, there's loads of cool resources in there. So we're going to talk about why it was created, why it's needed, what's in it, and stuff like that. And it's really exciting. So this is, if you're listening to the podcast, this is also released as a YouTube video on my channel. If you're watching the YouTube channel, you can also download it and listen to it as a podcast. Please do. I'm a small YouTuber, so subscribe, all the usual kind of stuff, So with that, I'll jump over to the chat, shall I? Let's do that. So, hello, Laura, Emrys, how you doing?
Hi.
Hi,
I'm
doing
good.
Yeah, so you're both having what is it, Monday afternoon? Are you having a good afternoon?
It's hard to believe it's only Monday. It's already been a busy day, but yeah, good. The weather's
I'm not
nice.
busy. I'm not busy as a student.
Oh, that's the wrong answer. You're supposed to say, yes, I'm really, really busy.
I mean, yeah, I'm really busy. I'm really busy. Please grab me my extension.
So, can I get you both to introduce yourself? So, Laura, shall we start with you? Who are you? What do you do? Why are you here?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Laura Reyes. I work at the Royal Society of Chemistry, so I'm the program manager of inclusion and diversity. And I'm here to talk about the LGBT toolkit.
Awesome, fantastic. And Emrys, who are you?
So I'm Emrys. I am a student at the University of Cambridge doing a master's slowly, but I also did an internship at the Royal Society of Chemistry this summer in the inclusion and diversity team, and my kind of main project was developing the LGBT plus toolkit with the team. So
yeah, excellent. Which is how we managed to meet, which is really good. And Laura, I believe I met you at the LGBTQ plus seminar last year for the first time.
Yeah, I think so. And then the Pride in STEM Outthinkers event
Yes.
a little bit afterwards. And then soon after that, we went into lockdown. So
well, the that Outthinkers event that you had was the last in-person event that I talked at.
Yeah, that was late February. Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I know that I got sick at the end of I was actually sick coming down with something at the time, and so who knows what, but in hindsight.
Well, you did a great job either way. I didn't notice.
Yeah, I was on the lemsips keeping it together. But yeah, so hopefully I wasn't a super spreader, but the rules were slightly different at the time, so
Yeah.
So I got some sort of questions. So what is the inclusion and diversity team at the Royal Society of Chemistry. What is it that why do you exist? What is it you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, great question as a starting ground. So the inclusion and diversity team, I mean, we are the Royal Society of Chemistry part of that. So we do serve the chemical sciences community. And that's, it's within the external relations team. So I think that's also, that helps point you towards the direction of, we're externally facing. We do serve the external chemical sciences community. So this is, it can include members of the RSC, but not necessarily. And a lot of the work that we do is applicable worldwide across, our membership, but also across not just the UK, across different countries. Maybe neighboring disciplines can, use our resources and our work as well. And what we do is really try to make chemistry welcoming for everybody. So we try to address inclusion and diversity issues for underrepresented groups. So, within the context of this conversation today, that includes LGBT plus individuals, but we do a bunch of work for, anything from gender parity, so improving women's progression and retention within the chemical sciences. Race and ethnicity is a huge focus for us as well. So it's really just trying to, first of all, determine who is underrepresented in the chemical sciences. We try to base everything that we do on data and evidence, and then figuring out what is needed to improve the inclusion of these individuals, and then in turn, the diversity of the chemical sciences. And that's all to retain the best talent, really.
Yeah. And Emrys, how did you end up sort of working with the Royal Society of Chemistry? What was it that you were doing? And
so it was rogue for me. So I'm not a chemist. I am not even a scientist. But I applied to a internship scheme for disabled students and graduates called Change 100, which is a really great scheme that matches up disabled students and graduates with placements and kind of tries to overcome the underrepresentation of disabled people in employment and the underemployment of disabled people. And so I was matched up with the IND team at RSC, which was really exciting because I'd expected something a lot less kind of up my street. And so it was really great to come into the team, which was really welcoming, really lovely, and kind of basically be given, so I fed into a lot of what was going on, a lot of kind of accessibility and disability stuff, but also was essentially kind of handed this project of developing some kind of ongoing actions and something to follow up the Exploring the Workplace for LGBT plus physical scientists report that came out in 2019. So it was sort of my task with, in collaboration with the rest of the team and with others, to pick something and run with it that would kind of work on the areas that were pinpointed in that report.
That's cool. And yeah, we will mention that, but I'm just curious, Laura, do you have a chemistry or science background as well, or?
Yeah, I do actually. I'm a chemist by training. So I did my PhD. Well, we have something in common. I did it in materials science, sort of nanomaterials for heterogeneous catalysis. But, pretty early on in my grad school experience, I just, I wasn't sure if research was the path for me. And so that's how I ended up kind of on this, what I call behind the scenes type of roles, where I'm still I'm so passionate about the chemistry community, and I still want to be involved in chemistry, but in a very different role than doing the chemistry myself.
No, that's really interesting to know as well. So I think the last video interview that I did was with Dr. Lillian Hunt, who works for the EDIS, which she works in equality and diversity for sort of, I guess, biology stuff from my inexperienced point of view. And I've also got another one coming up with someone that works for Springer as well, who did a PhD in physics, but is working for them. And so, having the science PhD or the degree, there's different roles as well. It's not just about going and working in a lab, whether that's for a company, whether it's for research, because it doesn't suit everyone. Not everyone wants to. And, you know, I mean, I got to look at it and think it would be lovely to have a permanent contract rather than constantly having those 12 months, 6 months, 5 months contracts. So it's good to see that there's sort of different options. But I guess you have a little bit of understanding of what it's like to be a person in materials. I think that materials is quite a good field. From my experience, I've always seen it as quite a nice open field. Chemistry, I think it can really depend on the group and the university, but I'm sure that's true of materials as well. I don't know how
I'm not sure if I've noticed a specific contrast like that. But I think like with any workplace, there's just different cultures, which ties in nicely to our conversation of LGBT, the workplace for LGBT scientists. But yeah, just like in any workplace, I think it does definitely depend on your colleagues and the group culture, how friendly and dynamic that will be, and if it's the right fit for you and everything.
Yeah, no, definitely. And Emrys, how are you finding it? I mean, you know, you're working with chemists, so are you finding it a culture shock? Are you finding it surprising? Are you finding anything, you know, is it eye-opening?
For sure. I think I was slightly, worried that I would kind of come in and be like, hello, I know nothing about chemicals. What are they? But I mean, so like, it definitely wasn't an issue for the kind of the work that I was doing over the summer, but I think it was definitely also obviously useful to have people to talk to who had experience of STEM workplaces and chemistry workplaces. Although obviously those are incredibly diverse, I think that was one of the kind of approaches that we consciously took from the beginning, was thinking about trying to, where existing resources focus on university experience or industry experience or whatever it may be, we tried to kind of take a kind of across the board approach. And actually kind of my experience within a university and kind of trying to make change in that university, including for like trans students and stuff, was I think like just as relevant. So that was reassuring, relief.
I think for us, adding to that, it was so valuable to actually have Emrys's experience in our team and the right skill set for the development of this toolkit. And I mean, Emrys, you could have been a scientist or not. I don't know if that would have made a significant difference. It might have, it might not have, but I think the experience that you did bring to the creation of the toolkit was just exactly what we needed, and hence why we're able to launch these resources now.
I do think as well, I mean, this is true for science across the board, and this is why we want to be more inclusive, is that having people from different backgrounds with different experiences, it brings in different information and different thoughts and different ways of looking at it. And whether it's the creation of these toolkits or whether it's actual sort of lab work, developing new chemicals or materials, you know, this is a bonus. I think science should be very much a collaborative process. I think we really gain something from having those different points of views, and people who aren't, come from the outside, they can sort of see things that sometimes we just miss. We just don't notice.
Definitely. And that does drive all of the work that we do with inclusion and diversity. Like the whole point is that we're losing talent because some people are not given the same opportunities, or they face discrimination, they face bigger barriers. And so if we're losing this talent and have unequal representation, at the end of, there's always academic leaky pipeline picture, but this is true in other areas of the chemical sciences as well, that if we're just losing talent, then we're losing that diversity of thought and people that might have given huge contributions to the field, and they just had to leave because it wasn't a welcoming space for them. Yeah. That's not okay.
Yeah. And actually, so I keep on saying that this is one of the most important things when it comes to tackling inequality, is admitting that you've got a problem, finding out that you've got a problem, and actually being able to sort of put some numbers on it, put it in a report. I think that's really important. And so there was the launch of the, and I probably will get the name slightly wrong, but it was the Climate for LGBT Scientists in Physical Sciences, which was launched, was it last year or the year before?
Yeah, last year, yeah.
Time's wibbly and wobbly.
I know.
Especially when
but that was what I really liked about that, was that it wasn't just, so it was a collaborative process. It was the Royal Astronomy Society, the Institute of Physics, and the Royal Society of Chemistry. So it's good to see the collaboration, because that meant that the reach was bigger. It meant that there was a large reach in terms of the people respondents. I think there was about 1,000 respondents.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that gives you more accurate data, which is really great. And there wasn't any hiding of the data. They weren't pretending that it was better than it was. And with data's really important as a scientist. Data's very, very important. But I love the fact that it also included personal testimonies as well.
Yeah.
Because sometimes if you just look at data, you lose those testimonies and you lose what's actually going on. You lose, track of the people in there. And so that report last year, I keep on going on about how good it is, because like I say, from the very first point of view, is that you're trying to find out what the problem is and you're not sugarcoating it. You're being honest. And I thought that was really important to me.
This was something that, it was one of the first things that I did kind of when I arrived after all the HR stuff, was given this report and was like, okay, read it. And also wasn't sort of just told to read it, but was kind of asked, like, what do you think about it? Do you have like criticism about it, or constructive criticism? And I had like very, very little, because it is just really good and what you said about the testimonies is really important as well, right? Because some of the people who are having like the most difficult experiences are in minorities of minorities, either because of they are a minority within the LGBT plus community, or because, for example, they are in certain roles that present different challenges. So like being able to kind of pick bits directly from the report to kind of then focus on and think about what deeply was really, really useful.
Yeah, and was there anything that particularly stood out to you? I mean, I'll ask Emrys first, but obviously I'll ask Laura as well. But was there anything that particularly stood out to you as surprising, as bad, especially as an outsider that's not a scientist? I'm kind of used to the culture of science because I've been doing it for 20 years. But from an outside point of view, was there anything that really stood out?
I think I didn't find necessarily that much of it actually surprising. There were some kind of little things that I just not kind of thought about in concrete terms, like the issues that arise with international mobility, for example, and how kind of core a part of their like job role of research or whatever that is for like so many chemists and physical scientists. So that was something maybe that kind of, not a surprise, but something that I was like, oh, right, yeah, obviously this is something that I should have been thinking about. So that sort of thing. I think maybe, the resource that we ended up making for LGBT plus teachers was off of the back of the data for teachers was really interesting, because more people were having better experiences of their workplace, but also more people were having worse experiences. And so there's really this kind of wider range of like workplace experiences that on average are wider range than in other roles. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. And just picking up on what you said, I mean, when I read the report, I think there was a few different things in there, but one of the things was that actually it was better than I expected, believe it or not, which is a positive thing, but I was actually expecting it to be worse. And so I was, I think some people who aren't in the LGBTI plus community might look at it and go, how can this such a large percentage of people feel that they're being harassed or being pushed out? And to me, I was like, oh, is that all? Which is a weird baseline way of looking at it, but it's true, unfortunately. And Laura, what about you? Was there anything that you saw? So you kind of came into the RSC at the end of this?
I came in January. So I've been at the RSC for almost a year now. So the LGBT report, the full title, I think exploring the workplace for LGBT plus physical scientists.
Yes.
There we go. Let's at least say it once, and then we can shorten it from here.
And I can put a link below as well.
Perfect. That would be great. Yeah. So that report had been launched the summer of 2019. So it's still fairly recent now, but at that time it was also quite recent. But I wasn't involved in its development. So I did kind of come into it a little bit like an outsider. And I think I'll echo a bit of what has been said so far. One of the things that I really admire about our team, if I can say that now as part of the team, is just that emphasis on data. This is something that, as a chemist in Canada, where I was previously, I always saw the reports that the RSC was putting out as so powerful, because it really, you can't argue against it. Like, it's just proof that there are issues. And that really is just, it just shuts down the argument. At least hopefully it shuts down any argument that, no, the issue is actually there. Let's actually do something about it now, rather than argue whether or not there is an issue in the first place. But I think, Clara, I think you're right that there was actually quite a bit of positivity within the report, but it still painted a picture that just wasn't good enough, hence the need to address it. I think one of the things that stood out to me, which might not be entirely surprising, but it just stood out again from the data, is the inequalities within LGBT plus experiences. So, I think it was comfort of workplaces and then supportive policies, at least those two. It might be in other areas, but those ones stood out to me, that men reported it more positively than women, who reported it more positively than non-binary individuals. And so, we can't just say like, oh, the LGBT plus climate is comfortable overall, because actually there's different levels of comfort within there. And so that's something that we tried to address in the toolkit as well. Like, there are different experiences. And then I think that the other thing that really stood out to me is just the sheer amount of recommendations that were at the end of the report. There are 3 areas for increased action. And I'll let Emrys expand on that a little bit when, talking about how the resources address those. But it was building a visibly welcoming community, reviewing and improving policies, introducing and improving training. And each of those 3 is written out for individuals, for employers, and for learned societies. And so it's just this like massive set of suggestions and work on how to improve the culture. And that's really powerful to see as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing, not just saying this is broken, but here's suggestions on how we might be able to fix it. I think that's really important. And it's something that I always try, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's like, I know this is broken, but we can't. And also what you said about the data, just having the data and it being there. Again, that's really important, because it's amazing, especially with LGBTI plus issues, the number of times we say that there's something wrong, but unless you've got that report, unless that data is there, unless someone's actually looked into it, people won't listen to you. People say, it's probably just you and your friends. So actually being able to have a wide sort of breadth of data is really, really important. That's, especially when we're talking about the experiences of transgender youth at the moment. People keep on saying, well, there's no data. And it's like, yeah, because no one's doing it. Doesn't mean it's not there, which is why having those personal testimonies is really important as well. And so, as part of that, this toolkit came about. So So what is the toolkit? What is it that you've put together? What is it that you are releasing? And tell me more about it.
So it is a kind of collection of resources in a kind of variation of formats, with obviously the kind of limitation of needing things to be online was there from the beginning. But I think the presentation, actually, the designer we worked with was really incredible, and the presentation of it is very like intuitive, hopefully. But so there's a group of resources. The report made it very easy. People have been saying, oh, this is really great, and I'm like, yeah, but it was there. You know, the report made it very easy to kind of go down these routes of thinking, okay, like holistically, like you said, how do we fix it? How do we present a kind of, here's how you fix it? We're not just gonna kind of wag a finger. We're gonna say, you know, hold your hand and like, so with that in mind, and as well, I think as an LGBT plus person, if you're trying to find kind of resources either for yourself or to kind of pass on to your employer or to your colleagues, a lot of the time you can end up reading through, like having to kind of scroll through a lot of like what we just talked about, like the kind of the data, the justification, when that's not necessarily what you want to read. So thinking of the kind of different audiences and what the different audiences for the toolkit needed was really helpful in terms of the structure of it. So what we ended up with in the end is there's a little list. So there's kind of 3 main booklets, I think, that give an overview of various areas for different specific audiences, and obviously these audiences will overlap, but so there's one for employers and managers and HR and supervisors, and that sort of thing, on how to kind of use the whatever power you have in those positions to make structural changes in the workplace that will, you know, create a kind of safe and comfortable place for LGBT plus people, and also just avoid kind of the kinds of indirect discrimination that a lot of the time people would just not, you know, they don't come with any malice, that people would just overlook, like how your systems are structured and that kind of thing. There's a booklet for LGBT plus individuals on kind of knowing your rights, finding support, and kind of tips, and that one was the most difficult to write for sure, because a lot of the time you're kind of there going, I know what I want to say and I want it to come across as in a certain way, but not that like you had to fix this yourself, because of course you don't. And then there's a booklet for kind of colleagues, people looking to be allies or to act in allyship, or other. I kind of tried not to use the noun ally as if it's like a thing that you can kind of be or not be, but kind of allyship, like kind of an active verb type approach to it. And then we've got kind of some bits pulling up on specific issues from the report. There's a resource for teachers because of the kind of wider range of experiences, and their like lack of networks was something that came up in the report there. We've got a resource for international mobility, and so that's partly kind of tips for individuals who are traveling, but also kind of addresses employers and says, here are your kind of responsibilities, like if your employees aren't kind of feeling safe wherever you're operating, then that's a problem. There's, what else is there? There's a glossary that kind of ties all the language in the toolkit together, and also hopefully kind of in itself there's a couple of little tips in it, like, oh, here's language that's probably a good idea to use or probably not a good idea to use, obviously with the caveat of different people preferring different things. And there's a little guide to the RSC pronoun stickers and how to use those practically at events. Obviously that's maybe not going to be of real life use for a while, but it's there. And then there's a set of posters, which kind of the idea of which is obviously to like advertise the toolkit and point people towards it, but also to kind of in and of itself, like if you see one of these in your workplace that someone has put up, then that kind of hopefully fulfills part of the visibly welcoming workplaces recommendation. I think that's everything.
I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff
I
here.
talked for a long time.
No, it's a there's a lot of stuff, but you mentioned that it was intuitive. You're right. I remember when
I missed one.
yeah.
I missed my favorite one, which is the trans resource. So a kind of spotlight kind of collecting together of all of the kind of info that is like particularly relevant for trans and non-binary people into one kind of guide with like 3 sections for like employers, individuals, prospective allies, and kind of gathers that together. And that was like a really important thing to have, I think, given obviously that trans people and non-binary people in the report were kind of showing to have like particular issues, particular, you know, on average kind of worse experiences. But also I think it's like really good to have that as like a kind of statement of support in itself, like
what you say about sort of just that visibility in the posters and stuff like that. I mean, I can't even describe how important it was to me to hear a president-elect in their speech specifically talk about gay people and trans people, and yes, didn't talk about intersex people or bi people, but I mean, that was such a momentous moment when he actually mentioned trans people and gay people, and I was just like, oh wow. That was just being mentioned. It was so important. Yeah, that was and you mentioned the graphic stuff. Like I say, I got the resources to have a look through beforehand, and I was thinking, oh, this is a lot, this is going to take me forever, but actually it was so simple and so well laid out and so easy to read through that I was able to get through it really quite quickly, and I did not expect that. I honestly saw the size of the pack and I'm like, oh my goodness. But
there was quite a difference between when I was sending them around like Word documents and looking at it and going, oh god, this is longer than my dissertation.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think the design in the end is just really lovely.
And the drawings are just really lovely, but I realise I'm also
biased. Featured, so you are biased.
You're both
I'm totally biased.
Oh yeah, I'm also, yeah. Different hair colour now though.
Oh,
yeah. It's great. For people that haven't seen it, there's a drawing of someone watching me doing my TED Talk on a screen, which is really, really cool. And I was actually able to share that with the head of the TEDx London people who gave me the talk. They were having a little bit of trouble, having a difficult time, and I was like, hey, look at this positive thing. I just showed it on my screen and they were like, oh wow.
That's so great.
That was fantastic.
So just sort of broaden it out a little bit more. There's so many resources, but I mean, Laura, who's this for? Who's this meant to help? Because there's stuff for teachers, there's stuff for researchers, there's stuff for, I mean, there's a lot of different stuff here. Who's this sort of aimed at?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you kind of just, in a way, summarize that it's for everyone. And what Emrys has designed is broad on purpose. It covers all these different areas. You know, anything that's more broad to build visibly welcoming spaces and, you know, just address LGBT inclusivity in general, to anything super specific, like, you know, for teachers, the trans spotlight is an important one. International mobility is also a huge one, because for research culture, it's kind of just assumed that you kind of have to go places, and that's not going to be safe for everybody. So that's an important one as well. But I think what we're trying to accomplish, if I had to sort of summarize it in this toolkit, is to provide support and guidance for employers and for colleagues, or, you know, people like friends, family, you know, for people to be allies, but teach what that means. Like Emrys said, you know, like allyship not as a noun, but as a verb. That allyship is it's not just a label, it's an active process, and what that really means to be an ally. It's not just, you know, rainbow lanyards. It's actually like you have to kind of equip yourself with some knowledge and to be able to have conversations and stand up for your colleagues that are underrepresented. And that stretches across other areas of work beyond LGBT. So beyond that, like, it's meant to support and guide, employers and colleagues and friends, people to support LGBT individuals, but it's also meant to empower LGBT individuals. So I would say that those are kind of the three main audiences that we have in mind for this.
Mm-hmm. That bit was really important as well, I think, because I kind of mentioned it already, but yeah, like a lot of the time, obviously, if what we're kind of advocating for is LGBT plus inclusion, and then you kind of look for resources and they sort of speak to you as though you're not there, as though you're not the one that's reading it. So we really wanted to avoid that and kind of make it clear, like, we're kind of preaching these kind of key messages or whatever, but we understand the kind of diversity of people that we're speaking to.
I think also, Emrys, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, that the balance was really hard to find as well, to not, the onus should not be on LGBT plus individuals to change the culture. So finding that balance of, yes, they're part of the conversation, and it has to be something inclusive of LGBT plus individuals. Anything that involves a change to include them has to include them as well in that process. How many times can we say inclusion in this? But it's not up to the underrepresented person to change the culture. And it's really, that's why I kind of started my answer with a focus on more so on employers and the people around the LGBT plus individuals, but also to empower the individuals themselves.
Mm-hmm. I think, like, the message it's kind of like I feel like if I say a twin message, I'm going to think of another one and another one. But if you like a kind of twin message of, to LGBT plus people, you deserve to be in a workplace that is safe and is comfortable and that treats you with dignity and respect. And then to people who are not LGBT plus, or people in, who might be, but who are kind of in positions of power in the structures of organizations, or like whatever it might be, this is your responsibility. Like, there's work to be done. Like, you have a responsibility to this community, just as obviously that members of the LGBT plus community have a responsibility to other marginalized communities that we're not part of.
Yeah, it's my vein just stopped in the middle, but yeah, no, it's you're right. I it's interesting, this talk of onus on people, because on one side, I would not want anything to be done that doesn't include good input from, in this case, LGBTI plus people. But at the same time, we don't want to be making people do it. It's all about giving people the resource, allowing to, to giving them support to make these resources, to change the community, but with the input from the people, so that it feels like we're being consulted. Yeah.
And that was so, so the kind of process of putting the toolkit together was really fun, just in terms of being able to kind of speak to people. Obviously, speak to people, and then some of the things that we're discussing are quite heavy, but it's nice to feel like, especially coming in as a non-scientist, to try and it was nice to get that input and have it feel like the ethos of what we were kind of saying in the resources was also reflected in the process of consultation, of making the resources and who we talk to. But also, one thing that I think was really striking about my time at the RSC was sort of learning that these things, these kind of experiences that I have and knowledges that I have and kind of are skills, and being able to kind of do a job and be recognized and paid for it, as opposed to kind of previous situations where kind of within the university, for example, I think a lot of universities are this way, right, that it feels like an antagonism to sort of push for change for marginalized groups, rather than actually what it is, which is you're doing them a favor. So that was really like important, and just on a personal level I was like, I can do things. Great.
You did them very well.
Thank you.
And actually, I do wonder about this, because obviously, like you say, you've not come from a chemistry background, and whether you'll be in science next or not, who knows? I don't know where you're going to end up, and at this stage maybe you don't know either. But this toolkit that's been produced, I feel like it's not a chemistry toolkit, it's not a science toolkit, it's a toolkit for LGBT. I mean, do you think this is something that even if you're not in chemistry, not in science, you can still say, like, here's an example of a really good toolkit, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I hope it will travel, because, you know, kind of as we were making it, we're thinking, yes, we want this to be STEM specific, and it does kind of obviously come from that data and come from these experiences, but also, like, this isn't a STEM only problem, right? Or like a material sciences only problem, or whatever, a chemistry only problem. So I hope it will be able to kind of travel, and that a lot of the kind of key messages will be things that are picked up by, I don't know who, but
Yeah.
you know, and a lot of the time, obviously, these things kind of travel outside of the chemistry community naturally, in the sense that, like, if you're making changes within certain departments in a university, then you might need to be making changes higher up in the university, and that impacts on other departments. And if it's an industry, then there's always going to be like different roles within a particular industry or like company or whatever. So yeah, I hope it will travel. I will be showing it like like my baby to people, for sure.
I think there's a lot of value. Like, you're absolutely right that this isn't just chemistry specific, but there is value to you know, a professional body like the RSC putting out a toolkit of resources with the chemistry community as its, you know, core audience in mind. Because I think, you know, this is more from my personal experience in grad school, I think there's definitely a little bit of a disconnect that if something isn't for chemistry, it doesn't always make its way in. And obviously for the RSC, for us, it's very important that this change does make its way into the community and that people actually use these resources. And coming from us, it's our hope that, you know, they actually will get used, that people know that this is specifically for them, for all the individuals in the chemical sciences.
Right. And I think because existing kind of LGBT and STEM things, even as a kind of that being wider than just chemistry or whatever, even like that, within that, obviously there's like so many kind of great initiatives, and so many of them are like very much grassroots, very much like people are, you know, contorting themselves to try and kind of be able to do everything and set these things up without like institutional support. And so hopefully it kind of gives that opportunity to boost, you know, this intersection, and this like community is like specifically important to people in like STEM more widely, right? And yeah, because I think somebody there was a question at some point, oh, you know, what is there about this that makes it different from I don't know, going on like the Stonewall website or whatever? And I think it's like, well, do people go on the Stonewall website? Because I know like every job I've ever been in, that those kinds of, I don't know, there's just a tendency to see any kind of IND stuff that comes from like an external organization whose priority is that stuff, is to be like, oh, that's kind of their thing, and that's kind of over there, and maybe it's relevant to us, but we're not going to like seek it out. Whereas actually this is kind of saying, no, look, this is important here, we're bringing it to your door.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think I mean, I think especially with schools and things, I think that the Stonewall resources can be really useful, and I do think that they get used, but outside of schools,
yeah, exactly,
not so much. And that, of course, depends on the school. Whereas if you've got something, in many ways, you've got something which is quite a big, broad, like this is how to be good with LGBTI plus people and young people, But because it's got that Royal Society of Chemistry badge on it, it's more likely to be picked up by science departments, right? Than that wouldn't necessarily look at it otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope, at least, that it does just break down that initial barrier, that inertia, to actually consider it, because we've basically done all this work and assembled it for people to use. Maybe we're pointing to places like Stonewall. We're not trying to take the place of Stonewall at all, but people might not know about these various organizations, and that they're out there to implement, different policies, more inclusive policies and whatnot. And so hopefully these resources will kind of help bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm.
But actually,
maybe sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was thinking, maybe I've definitely come across kind of specific departments in universities that kind of say, oh, this isn't relevant to us because that's like a humanities thing, or that's whatever it might be, and kind of obviously that's not the case. And I think focusing on the kind of workplace environment is helpful in that as well. It's no, this isn't some high level ideological debate. It's literally just individual people's experiences and how we can make structural changes to make those better, right?
Yeah.
This seems like a good time to maybe watch the video from Helen Payne, the acting CEO of the RSC, just to show the the importance of the RSC, or of this toolkit to the RSC.
Yeah, well, actually, that was going to be my very next question. Once that was, is this important to the RSC? The obvious answer would be that, there was a report that came out last year and already there's this toolkit come out. Things take a long time to happen, but this has actually had quite a big turnaround. So that suggests that it is important.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so you've got a video from Helen. So just explain who Helen is for people that don't know.
Of course, yeah. So Helen Payne is the acting CEO of the Royal Society of Chemistry. And so she's put together a little video for us. Unfortunately, she could not join us for this actual live recording, but did send along a video trying to open. Yeah, there we go. It's open right now. So I'll play that. It's just about 2 minutes.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So hello, I'm Helen Payne. I'm the Acting Chief Executive of the Royal Society of Chemistry, and the pronouns that I use are she and her. Thank you so much to Clara for having Emrys and Laura on your podcast, and I'm really sorry that I can't join you for the live conversation. The launch of this LGBT+ toolkit follows a joint report we produced last year with the Institute of Physics and also the Royal Astronomical Society. Exploring the workplace for LGBT+ physical scientists found that although the workplace climate is generally improving, more action is needed to build genuine LGBT+ inclusivity in the physical sciences. And last year I was very proud to launch the report, but I did say at the time that it must not be a resource that simply sits on the shelf, but it has to call us all to action. So I'm really pleased to see that we're delivering resources to help tackle the key issues identified in our report, including a specific focus on trans inclusivity. We want to help provide the guidance and support to create a chemistry culture where everybody feels that they can bring their whole selves to work and LGBT+ scientists can fulfill their potential. So whether we recognise it or not, we're all here to help make our culture in our workplaces the best it can be. And this toolkit provides the resources for employers and for colleagues to take part in positive change. And this is in addition to empowering LGBT+ individuals. So taking concrete steps towards greater LGBT+ inclusivity is a key part of fostering our diverse and welcoming scientific workplaces, so that we can retain talented people of all backgrounds and identities.
Great.
Excellent, and yeah, I mean, it was great to see Helen at the report of the launch of the report last year, and gave a talk, and it was nice to hear her emphasising that, yeah, actually they want to follow up on this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, so this is, I mean, the report was really just a starting point for the RSC, right? It was to understand the current point at where we stand, to understand and identify what the issues being faced by LGBT plus individuals. But, you know, especially having identified those issues, then there needs to be action from them. And so this toolkit is a huge part of that. It's not the only thing, but it is a huge part of our follow-up actions to that report.
No, definitely. Like I say, it does mean a lot, and it's great to see that it's, you know, there's people at the very top are sort of contributing and getting involved, and it was really nice of Helen to sort of send this message and highlight, you know, just talk about it. And it's interesting because I think I already mentioned that it's not just a case of, because for me, one of the most important things is the first step is admitting there's an issue. And what the RSC are saying is that, well, now we've done that and we know there's an issue, so now we're going to continue. You know, it's kind of, most people haven't taken that first step. And to see the RSC sort of, and that's why it's been such a pleasure to work with you over the last few years with the society, because, you know, it seems genuine to me. You know, it comes across, and it doesn't mean that everyone's perfect. Everyone has their flaws and everyone gets things wrong. But I feel like there's a genuine look at honesty and look to improve that, which is good. It's nice to me.
Yeah, that was definitely like what I found, I think, when just speaking to kind of friends who are at a similar stage, you know, just graduated or whatever it might be, kind of talking about my job. They were all like, how have you found this? Especially other trans friends and non-binary friends, like, how have you found this place that is actually really nice, like in a nice environment to work at? It was just unfair amounts of luck, probably.
I think we're the ones that got lucky having you as our intern.
Gosh.
I'll always say luck is an interesting thing, that you kind of, there's definitely this luck of timing, that you're in the right place at the right time. But the truth is that if you haven't put the hard work in beforehand, you won't get recommended for it. You won't get that opportunity. And if there's opportunities that come up as a result of that, it's because you worked hard when you did it. It's luck. There's definitely truth that, you know, sometimes timing is lucky, but you still don't get that unless you've put the effort in. So
that echoes exactly my thoughts. And in my previous lives in other roles, I have said that also to students. You know, like, you hear so often in different career stories that, you know, luck is a huge part of it. But that's really, I agree completely with you that it's really just the timing, and the rest is actually, you know, in this case, actually Emrys's expertise synced up exactly with what we needed. And that doesn't just happen overnight. Like, expertise is not luck. Expertise and skill set and everything, that's hard work.
Yeah. I guess, like, kind of like I said, like, learning that things as a kind of marginalized person, learning that your experiences and kind of what you've done to make yours and your community's experiences better in like different settings is also like, that's a skill and that's useful. And that was just really nice. Like, I felt very much at all points kind of treated like an expert, which was kind of wild, because I was like, well, I'm just here. I'm being trans and disabled and like whatever else.
But you also have expertise in, you know, in making things better for other people. It's not just your personal experience, as valid as that is. It's not just that. It's actually the work that you have done in the past. It may not have been paid work, but it was still work that you brought forward to the internship.
Yeah,
that's what I kind of want to say to students, I guess, like, value what you do, and to everyone, because part of what is in the toolkit is about how kind of IND work is very often voluntary, very often like on top of other things, and kind of, I think we say fairly firmly to institutions, kind of, you know, don't let that be the only way that you develop your, like, policy and your practices is like through work that people are doing, because they're like, if I don't do this, nobody will. But like recognize the kind of work.
Yeah, and I think that leads on. I mean, Laura, what else is the RSC going to be doing to support this toolkit? So there's the toolkit is going to be launched in a few days from us recording this. So by the time people hear it, it will already be launched. And again, we'll put a link below. And for those that catch it quickly, there's going to be a launch event. But if you're but that launch event is going to be the day after this comes out, so there's a chance that people might not catch that. Although, will that be recorded? Will that be?
Yes, yeah. So I guess for additional context, so we're going to have an LGBT plus inclusivity webinar on Friday, November 13th, and Clara is one of our speakers for that. So that will be also an advanced celebration of Lgbt STEM Day, which is the week after, but also tying into the release of this toolkit. So our other two speakers will be Izzy Jayasinghe and David Smith, who's also, well, he's a chemistry professor, but also one of the members of our Inclusion and Diversity Committee, so has been very involved in all this work so far. So that's one of the things that people can sign up for if they catch it on time, and we do record it, and this is done in collaboration with Chemistry World. And so Chemistry World, on their YouTube page, they put up all the recordings from this webinar series, which is called Building a Better Chemistry Culture. So that kind of, those kind of standalone events, in a way, continue throughout our work. So things like that, or we referred to earlier the Pride in STEM event, which, to be fair, was not our event, but we would love to continue supporting different events run by the community. We also have an Inclusion and Diversity Fund that provides financial support for these types of events. So Tiger in STEM, for example, benefited from this quite recently. So that will continue that kind of supporting existing things, so continuing to celebrate days like LGBT STEM Day, Pride Month, LGBT History Month, and doing what we can to really just continue to improve visibility for LGBT chemists and talking about these issues that are being faced by individuals in the community. And I guess on that note as well, part of what we want to do with any work that we do is to open up the conversation. And something coming up for us in December is our annual Inclusion and Diversity Forum. So although this year's forum will have a focus on race inequality, this is on December 8th, by the way, if anyone catches this in advance, to still register. It's going to be focused on race inequality, but a lot of the things that we're going to be discussing, especially something like allyship, is so relevant to the LGBT plus community and our work in that area as well. Plus, of course, like, it's not siloed experiences. There's also intersectional experiences that we really want to hear from. So this ID forum is, it actually came about in response to our Breaking the Barriers report and the LGBT plus report, because there really was a need to open up the conversation and hear directly from the community. So like I said, we really want to develop the concept of what it means to be an ally, like how can that be an active process, and to really, shift the conversation away from just like, here are the issues being faced, to how can we all address those issues, and how can we all be champions for, talking about everything and addressing the problems behind the issues being faced. That will continue for us as well. It would also be interesting, as part of our ongoing work, to see how things have changed since the previous report. That was, like, we have a baseline. We know where we stood at the point of release of that report, but is the work that we're doing addressing that? It would be really interesting to see how that changes. And I think lastly, other than maybe we can talk about the seminar in a bit, since Clara, I know you're quite involved in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But lastly, we also have the bullying and harassment support service. So this was it's a phone-based, but also there's an email form that you can fill in. So basically anybody that's affected by or concerned by bullying and harassment in the chemical sciences can call in to this support service. And that was because unfortunately there was quite a significant amount of evidence that bullying and harassment affects, LGBT plus individuals, as well as in breaking the barriers in that work, it affects women as well. And so that support service is quite important for, tying into the LGBT plus work, even if it's not solely for LGBT individuals.
And I think that they're circular as well, right? Like the kind of the toolkit is going to feed into how, like, the expertise of the people who kind of are on that line and can support people, and then obviously hopefully it'll just kind of spiral into a beautiful rainbow of LGBT plus inclusivity.
What a beautiful image.
Yeah, but like you say, it isn't just LGBTI plus inclusion. There's disability inclusion, there's race, there's gender, there's religion. It's kind of, and that's why it's important. I mean, I don't want, obviously I'm fighting for my corner in terms of trans inclusion specifically, but I don't want equality for me. I want equality for everyone. I want equity for everyone. And that's what's really important. And these, we build these different sections up, and we address the individual issues, but then a lot of the basic issues are the same. A lot of the fundamental underlying issues are the same. And so we use these building blocks, but then we work together to improve things, which is good.
Yeah. And I think hopefully if I've succeeded in the goal of kind of making that something that the toolkit resources are kind of quite aware of. So like even in the resource that's aimed at empowering LGBT plus individuals, there is still again a section on like consider kind of your own, like obviously your own kind of individual actions towards others, but also if you're part of an LGBT plus network or community in your workplace, like is that inclusive of all LGBT plus identities? Is it inclusive of like intersectional experiences? Are your events accessible to disabled people? Are you using kind of the inclusive pride flag or like whatever it might be, just like that being kind of a part of it. And again, with the allyship resource, hopefully that sort of, I would hope basically that that everyone who reads the LGBT plus resource would also read the allyship resource, even though it's kind of not saying this is aimed at you, because while it's not our responsibility to advance LGBT plus inclusion as LGBT plus people, it is our responsibility to be aware of, like, obviously every other kind of issue of inclusion and diversity, and like make sure that we're not fighting single issue.
Yeah, and that's why it's great. I mean, with the launch event, I know with the seminar, the webinar series that you've been putting on at the RSC, there's always been, I think you've got a BSL interpreter, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So for every single one, we've had a BSL interpreter, and then that's part of the recording as well. And obviously, I mean, there's advances all the time in captioning technology and whatnot, but that's by far the best solution that we found so far, and it's worked out really well. We have had actually some feedback too that it has been useful for people. So that's obviously great to see. I mean, it's something that we were doing anyway, but if somebody has actually benefited from the interpretation services, then fantastic. I guess I missed in my list of things, I missed one thing that Emrys brought up, the guides that we have on inclusive, we have inclusive events, inclusive communications, and committees. So those are other resources that, again, aren't solely for this conversation of, LGBT plus inclusivity, but they're certainly relevant to the, well, not just to that conversation, but to what else can be considered.
And obviously those are super relevant for disability on all our levels. It was really cool to have the opportunity to feed into those and kind of think, you know, who has different needs that need to be considered in terms of access. But yeah, they're also kind of quite holistic in terms of use gender neutral language, or think about whether your meetings are falling on religious holidays, or like whatever it might be.
No, that's good. That's good. Like I say, it's important to look at everything, and that's why I like groups that are definitely pushing for, you know, equity in STEM, not just for LGBT or disability or race. I like, we still need those individual ones, but I love it when there's something that comes together and brings different expertise. And I've learned so much. We mentioned the tigers in STEM, and it's not the first time I've mentioned them, mostly because most of the people that have been on this podcast have been tigers, to be fair. But that's it. I'm learning so much about race that, you know, things even over the last 6 months, it's like, oh, I shouldn't be doing that, I should be doing this. And we're always open to listening and learning. I think that's the best thing we can do with our as allies, is be open to criticism and realize, like, oh yeah, no, you're right, we're getting that wrong, and that's what I want other people to do as well.
And Emrys, actually, one of the things that really stood out to me as just so nicely phrased in one of the toolkit resources was the calling in versus calling out. Maybe you can talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, I can't remember where I kind of poached that from years back or whatever, but the idea being that especially when you're acting kind of in allyship with a group that you're not part of, and you're trying to kind of speak to someone else on their behalf, kind of it not being a one-upping contest of like who's the better ally and like, aha, you made a mistake, and calling them out on it, but the idea being calling in and in a sort of just open way. I'm trying to like, physically embody calling in,
just gather everyone.
Yeah, gather everyone and hug everyone, no, but like, you know, open that conversation, invite people in, like with the idea being like, you're not winning something over someone by calling something out or calling something in that like that they have done or said, and that they then get to experience it as, I've not lost something here by having this thing pointed out, I've gained something. So yeah, I think that's important and kind of what underpins the allyship resource and other things as well, hopefully.
Absolutely. And I mean, one thing that, so, you know, coming back to the sort of the report for the climate, you mentioned earlier the bullying and harassment resources, because, you know, the sad truth, and we see this a lot with race and other diversities as well, is that, you know, a lot of people in the physical sciences do feel bullied, they do feel harassed. And so you mentioned this bullying and harassment video, and this is more for, you know, this is for all people, right?
Yeah. So I'd be happy to play that, because it's a very short video. It's less than 2 minutes, but it summarizes a lot of what even is bullying and harassment, and why is it an issue? Because I think that could still be misunderstood, and I'm not going to repeat what's in the video because we're about to see it, but it does a good job of just explaining what that is.
That sounds good.
A lot has been done to prevent workplace bullying and harassment. The truth, however, is that we still have a long way to go. For example, a recent report found that one barrier to women's retention and progression in the chemical sciences is widespread discrimination, harassment and bullying. But what exactly are bullying and harassment? Bullying is offensive, intimidating, malicious or insulting behaviour. It's an abuse or misuse of power through means intended to undermine, humiliate, denigrate or injure the recipient. Harassment is unwanted conduct affecting a person's dignity and can relate to a range of characteristics. Those accused of such behaviour are not always aware they've caused offence. A key understanding, however, is not whether the conduct was intended on the part of the perpetrator, but whether it was unwanted on the part of the recipient. A good question to ask is, would a reasonable person observing such behaviour see it as bullying or harassment? If you witness such behaviour, think about how you can be an active bystander. After all, we know when something's wrong. Imagine sailing solo in a hired boat and it springs a leak. That's the boat hire company's problem, right? Even so, you wouldn't think twice about taking action. That's the attitude we need to fix bullying and harassment. Ask if there's active bystander training available in your institution. And remember, good role models aren't just good scientists, they're good people.
I like that. Yeah, no, it's cool. And also I think there's one of the panels says there's no place for religion in science, and I think that's a really important debate that's going on a lot at the moment, is that we don't need to be actively inclusive. Science doesn't care about sexuality, it doesn't care about race, and so it's good to sort of see that comment highlighted. It's not about making place. It's nothing to do with religion. It's to do with the people, and if the people are religious, then you need to be tolerant of that. And it's the same with LGBTI plus stuff. It's about getting the most out of our scientists. It's about getting the most out of our researchers, and that includes supporting people. It means that giving them a place to be. We had in the report, they had fairly high levels. You know, if you're LGB, you're much more likely to look at leaving science than if you're not LGB. And if you're trans, that goes up even higher. And I speak from experience of being one of those people that, you know, I mean, I had a different degree. I had a conversion course planned because I thought I was done once I transitioned. And I've talked about this quite a lot. And so it's, you know, we know that we've got more people are saying that they're thinking of leaving. But what we also have to remember is that these are the people that have stayed in. This is from the sort of survivor point of view. And so if the numbers are already so elevated for LGBT people in science, how many more have we actually lost? How many more have left? And it's really difficult to know how to get that data, let's be honest, because if people have left, they've left. I was having a conversation with the UKRI about this recently, actually, just seeing if we can maybe we can find that gap between PhD to postdoc or PhD to staying in STEM, because they've got that link in there. And maybe if people know that they're going to be leaving, that'd be a good time to do that survey. Although writing a thesis isn't the most fun time anyway, so probably everyone's thinking of leaving at that point.
Yeah. There's probably some truth to that. But yeah, I think you're so right that it is, we are taking to get that data, we have to have access to people to fill in the survey or tell us about their experiences. And you're right that, I mean, I think there's still value in the data that there is, but it is a bit of like, you know, you kind of have to fill in the gaps and assess it from a different perspective than if you could reach out to the people that did leave and ask them what was behind that choice. But I think, yeah, I mean, basically, like to kind of go back to the bullying and harassment video and some of the things that we were talking about before, like the whole point of all of this is that everybody should feel safe and supported to bring their full selves to work. And whether or not they choose to is entirely up to them. But the whole...
That is really important as well. Yeah. Kind of, that was something that I mean, I spoke to you about this, Clara, right? Like way back, I was kind of, I'm worried about kind of not representing enough the kind of concerns of people who are not necessarily out as LGBT plus in the workplace or in like a tool or in particular workplace settings or whatever it might be. And so we got some really helpful input from various people on that and kind of tried to make it clear, especially in kind of places where it would be easy to try and encourage people, oh, you know, come out and be a role model for this, and be a, you know, stand up here and sort of, I am proof that this can happen. And obviously when people do that, it's wonderful, but that doesn't mean that anybody should ever feel like there's any pressure to do that, just as they shouldn't feel that there's any pressure to stay in the closet.
Yeah, whenever people come up to me, I'm in a place of privilege is the wrong word. I'm in an honoured place, because people do come out to me because of my position in the university and stuff like that. And I hear stories all the time, and I say, look, you know, you just take it at your own pace. It's a personal choice, and you're still a member of the LGBT community, whether you're out or not. And I actually sort of tried to make a video for, I made a video for Pride, and I said, like, you know, whether you're out or whether you're not, you're part of the community. And I wasn't in any place to do this sort of talk, this sort of visibility 6 years ago. I wasn't. I was in a completely different place. Now it's sort of I almost breathe it, but I wasn't in that situation. And so it's okay for other people to not be in that situation. You don't have to be a role model. You don't have to stand out. You don't have to stand up. Just look after you first.
And I think that's, oh, sorry.
It's okay, go ahead.
I'm so bad. I think that's kind of a really important point then that leads into other things, right? So like firstly, the kind of importance of structural changes, and of, you know, of employers kind of saying, right, what things are there in our processes, in our policies, and our whatever that may be affecting people, and we don't know about it because they're not out. And so, and the solution to that is not to like find them and drag them out, but it's to kind of say, you know, what changes can be made to systems that then just make people's lives easier in ways we don't even know. And then the other thing is, obviously, like what was brought up in the video about kind of harassment is not like, something can still be harassment even if the person whose actions were acted, person doing something didn't intend for it to even like be harmful at all. It can still be harassment. It can still create an unwelcome environment, and that's not then a like condemnation of the person who, you know, made this mistake or kind of said this like tone deaf thing. It's just a kind of recognition of like, we can all do harm, and therefore we can all work to not do harm and to undo harm.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think what I was going to say too is that it's like it's not just the temporal or the snapshot of like where you're at now, and if you want to step out and, you know, be this person that is a visible role model, that may never be the case for some people because they just don't want to, and that's okay too. And this isn't just for LGBT plus individuals, it can be for anybody. But yeah, I think it's, you know, anybody that wants to separate their personal life and their work life, great, do that. But if you want to talk about, you know, your partner and you're not heterosexual, you should feel safe about doing that. If you're transitioning, you should feel safe and welcome in a workplace to do that. Same thing goes for like, yeah, like religion, if you want to bring that up in your workplace and not face discrimination just because of these different characteristics. And that's the goal, like that it will be a welcoming space for everybody, but that doesn't mean that we're actually saying to LGBT plus individuals, like, hey, you have to become a visible presence in the community, because that's just not, first of all, that's really a lot of pressure and it's really unfair on people, but it's also just really not the goal. Like that's not the point.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, sadly, if you speak up about gender in science, if you speak up about race, you know, if you speak up about being trans, full stop, you know, it's hard work. It's difficult. I interviewed Professor Jackson, Chris Jackson. He's going to be the first Black person to give a Royal Institute lecture, and the emails that he has received, just for visibility.
Yeah. We're actually having, Chris Jackson will be one of the speakers at the ID Forum. Yeah, that's part of the reason why. It's because, you know, just because he was chosen to give the Christmas lectures, he's facing so much abuse online, which really just, it's mind-blowing. It's so unfair that, you know, like, yeah, anyway, it's just, I'm about to go on a rant, but it's really unfair that just because he's Black and was chosen for this role that he's facing so much abuse, whereas his, you know, maybe white colleagues would not have faced the same thing. So yeah, that's a little bit tangential, but I guess also to bring it back around, let me bring in another thought that was slightly brought up earlier, that you know, in terms of workplace policies, that it is important to keep LGBT plus inclusivity at the forefront. And I think the toolkit that, you know, especially the employer's guide that Emrys has put together, that does it, explains why very well, in that, you know, if the response is, oh, but we don't have any LGBT plus staff, so therefore this is not relevant to us, it's actually, you know, that's not the point, because how would you know if they're not feeling supported in coming out, or even just, you know, maybe not coming out publicly, but identifying themselves to HR or whatever body there is, as someone that needs additional support.
I brought this up in a meeting not that long ago, that you know, they said, oh, the responses of LGBT people were so low that, you know, we couldn't include the data because it was just too low, and it would identify people. And, you know, when you look at the percentages of the population that are LGBT, it's like, well, that in itself tells you a lot. And it also doesn't mean that you should stop gathering that data. I keep on saying, like, I don't care if the numbers are small. Percentage-wise, the population, it isn't. And we know that as you go down in age, there's a higher population of the percentage of LGBT. So if you've got negligible numbers, that's the that right there is the problem, and that's why you've got to record that. Yeah, it's and I've been trying to look actually for the population, in fact, for the talk on Friday, but it really does depend on what report you read. So hey,
I've been we've been doing the same for I guess a plug for another piece of work that will be coming out by the end of the year is our diversity data report. So this is you know, the RSE's events, initiatives, programs to look at the diversity data of the people behind the, like, membership and whatnot, and, you know, different areas, but also benchmarking that against the UK population and saying, you know, like, this is where we're at, but this is also how it might compare to the population. With our race and ethnicity work, we put out an analysis of HESA data, higher education data, to exactly do that, to understand what the picture is in chemistry, also compared to the UK population, but also to just know where we stand. And that was the, you know, the starting point of the report, the Exploring the Workplace report, was also to know where we stand, and then that way we could improve in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, this is it. There's been a few reports the last few years. Before, we just didn't have the data, but, you know, there are additional factors, and LGBTI plus people are leaving sciences and stuff at a higher rate. And then if you drill down, you've got resources for schools, and the percentage of LGBTI plus young people who are leaving school or not doing as well as they should. There is actually data there that shows that, you know, we're already losing people at the school stage. So being able to reach out and have some sort of aspiration and show, like, hey, we've got queer scientists. We're not all, you know, if you are interested in science, you can be a scientist. We exist. There are queer people out there. Because I think, you know, as soon as young people think, oh, well, I like science, but, and I did the same thing, but there's no queer scientists, so I can't be a scientist. And so what's the point? And so this is why it's important to have these resources, show that the Royal Society of Chemistry is thinking about this, taking account of these different diversities, and then also showing that we do exist. And so hopefully that'll help with the aspirational side of it, you know.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, like, even like beyond or sort of underneath like all of the kind of key messages that we're trying to get across in the resources, the kind of key like underlying message is just like, obviously this is important and the RSC thinks this is important, so you should too. And I think especially in relation to trans inclusivity, that was quite important to spotlight, and like I kind of felt quite strongly from the beginning, like in a climate for trans people especially of kind of controversy and media over visibility almost in like the worst possible ways, and like under visibility in the good ways, then like to kind of have that resource as a statement of like, this is not about debates, this is about like people who need to feel comfortable in and safe in the workplaces, and like the RSC is like kind of unequivocally saying like that's what's important and that's what they're kind of doing the work on. I think that was like really important.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. It doesn't, this really isn't about whether you agree or disagree, you want to argue and debate. It's about, you have people that are LGBT, this is how you should support them, because we should be supporting, you have a duty of care to support them, but you should be supporting them, absolutely. And it's good. And you know, I mean, I'm hoping that, you know, we get to the point where we don't need these things. I run an LGBTI plus youth group. I'm hoping that we don't need, you know, I'm hoping that if we do what we are doing successfully, my group becomes obsolete because it's not necessary. We talked about the Lgbt Seminar. You know, we shouldn't need a specific LGBT STEM conference, but we do, because we need to be able to see other people. We need to see those role models, and like I say, again, if we're successful, we'll become obsolete. And
it's funny, that's my whole role as well, right? Like, wouldn't it be wonderful, my employment aside, if my role, if inclusion and diversity just didn't have to be such an important area of work anymore.
Yeah. And then we can use that money to do other stuff, you know, but hey, and hopefully we'll still all have jobs.
There is that.
Sadly, I don't think we're there yet.
No.
But we will be. And I will say it's been great. So yeah, we mentioned the LGBT Seminar, which is we're hosting it in Oxford, although it is digital, in January in 2021. So actually the deadline for submitting abstracts is coming up, and we really do want a good diverse group of people that are sort of submitting. I'll put a poster on screen, actually. I can do that, I can edit. But it's great that the RSC have supported that, you know, since it's been running, basically, and other institutions as well. It's great to see that support, because it shows that it does matter. It is important, you know.
Yeah, and we usually, in times of traveling to in-person events, we have provided travel bursaries as well. This year, obviously, that's not the case. There's no need to travel, but we do still have our grants for carers and assistance grants. So that's financial support for anybody that has to cover the cost of either caring responsibilities or additional assistance, you know, like equipment or assistance, like a BSL interpreter, for example, to attend an event. And this year, because of COVID, we've expanded that to online events as well.
Oh, that's really good to hear. Yeah, I know we're going to be, I'm just getting quotes for, well, I want live transcription rather than BSL interpretation, just because English typing and BSL are both English specific, and we do have an international audience, so we thought it might be slightly better if it was transcription.
Makes sense.
But I've been battling backwards and forwards with that one, to be honest. But it will be sort of done by someone rather than just auto-generated, especially with science. It throws up some very weird sentences if it's just auto-generated, I can tell you.
Yeah. That sounds great though. I'm glad that will be part of the event for sure.
Yeah, well, because we don't have the cost of halls and stuff like that, although of course it means that we've also we've not been asking for the money, although you'll be getting a request soon.
Perfect.
We thought that we had a lot less cost, and it's like, well, we can spend it on that. And then we've also realized that we need a slightly different, we need to buy an online platform. Well, that's complicated. That's a whole talk. That's a whole thing. Anyway, won't go into that. But, and I realized I've kept you for quite a long time. So it's been really lovely talking to you both. But, you know, the toolkit's going live in a few days. And well, when this comes out, it will be live because I'll coordinate. I think, Emrys, you already talked that, you know, your favorite part of the guide was the transcript toolkit, but is there anything you want to talk about, your little highlights, your little favorites, even a little story about it?
So yeah, definitely the trans one is important to me in the sense of being able to kind of quell the idea that things that are up in the air and are debatable and just say like it's simple. Like it's not always simple, but fundamentally like the fundamentals are simple to make a welcoming environment. I do quite like the allyship one as well, possibly poly, because I think it was the first one that I did like the majority of the content of, and it was quite nice to kind of, it was ambitious because out of all of the kind of recommendations of the report, we were trying to kind of cram everything into one, you know, even if not, oh, this, there we go, that recommendation's done, but like a stopgap. And so it kind of serves as like a little stopgap for kind of training and stuff like active bystander training, and kind of like covers the fundamentals of that in a way that I hope will be really kind of useful to people. So yeah, so that was exciting. But I feel like the most joy I got during it was getting the designs finalized, because they're just so cute. And I kind of from the start was like, okay, can we color? Can we do color?
Yeah.
Colors. And yes, we have colors. Very much so. And yeah, it just looks very pretty, and I'm excited to see it again.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And Laura, what about you? Any favorite? Any highlights?
Yeah, I think I mean, they really are all great, and you know, it's kind of like picking a favorite child or something controversial like that. But I think I can't help but feel kind of more excited about the employer's guide, because that, to me, I think that has the most potential to create change everywhere. Like we, as the RSC, we really have put together this resource for then other departments to enact change, or departments isn't even the right word, for other workplaces to enact change. So it could be, you know, like chemistry departments, or just maybe even individual research groups or teams in industry, you know, startups. Like it's really, anybody can pick this up, and the considerations that need to be included in their, you know, policies for LGBT employees, they're in there. And so I see that as really quite empowering to basically, yeah, like shift the conversation from like, okay, these resources are great, let's signpost them, to actually, no, there's one for employers to create change themselves. And so that's the one I'm kind of like most hopeful that will create change wherever it's picked up, and hopefully that will be global, that will be across different sectors, maybe not even just the chemical sciences as we talked about earlier. Like it really could be in many different workplaces. So yeah, I think I have to pick that one as my favorite.
That's cool. Yeah, and I really do hope that other, you know, departments, fields, societies pick this up and run with it once you've put the effort and work into a good resource. And I do genuinely believe it's a good resource. Then it, you know, there's no point other places repeating that work. It's, you know, work together, you've got it, and put your effort into the next stage, or the adjourning stage, or whatever it is. So yeah, that's awesome. Oh, cool. Well, thank you both so much for joining me and chatting away. And
Thanks for having us.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Clara. It was so lovely to chat with you.
It's been lovely. It's been absolutely lovely. And if there's any sort of links that you want to put, we'll put them down below, whether that's your own Twitters or whatever, or whether it's the links. We mentioned a few ones to the report and stuff, so we'll have them down below.
Lovely.
I'm saying below, that's for YouTube. For podcasts, it might be to the side or to the left or the right. I'm not really sure. They'll be somewhere.
I guess actually, maybe if I could mention the one link that needs to be mentioned is the toolkit one.
Yes.
So the short link for that will be rsc.li/LGBT-toolkit.
Cool. And like I say, it will be linked below.
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for chatting.
You.
It's been lovely. It's been really good.
Yes, it has.
Cool. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, so thank you, Emrys, and thank you, Laura. So I realise that for new viewers, it's sort of slightly different to what I normally do. I'm not usually talking about a specific thing. I'm usually talking about people and their careers, but it made sense in this case to talk about it. And I've been saying for a long time that I thought that it's really important that people do the survey to find out what the state of affairs is for LGBTI plus people, and that includes STEM. And so I think it's great that this was done with the report that the IOP, Reyes and RSC released. And I'll put the link for that below. They didn't hide anything. They didn't, pretend that it's better than it is. And then the RSC have actually released this toolkit, which was, part of the recommendations. And so I'm really excited about this. I think it's really a good thing. There will be an accompanying video on Chemistry World. The release event will be a webinar. I'm one of the speakers. And that will be released on, Chemistry World. Again, I'll try and put the link below once we have it, because the event hasn't happened yet. So I thought it was a good time to sort of do this video and to chat to them, and I'm really grateful to the RSC for reaching out to me about doing that and putting out this interview. I really enjoy working with the RSC, so that's really cool, and it's great to see the real true effort being made to sort of try and make science more inclusive. And it's not just LGBTI plus stuff that they're looking into. There's a lot of other reports going on and resources being made. So so with that, thanks for watching. Like I say, if you're new here, like, subscribe. You maybe can't do that with podcasts, but if you're watching YouTube, then you can. If you're on the podcast, then I think you can follow so that you get automatic downloads of other science chats. On my YouTube, I do social justice videos and board game reviews and stuff, whereas the podcast is just these science chats at the moment. So thanks for watching, and until next time, take care and bye bye.